Hi, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life, a podcast, one of several that we do here in the city of Peachtree Corners. And I appreciate everyone showing up either live to this Facebook live stream, or if you're seeing this on demand on iHeartRadio or Spotify, you're listening to it later. Please put a review on the podcast or wherever you are and share it to people that you like. Peachtree Corners Life Facebook page is where this originally is streaming from. And I have a guest tonight that is involved in politics. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes. And I just want to mention our main sponsor, Hargrave Fiber. They are a fiber company here in not only in the Southeast and Georgia, and they've been working really close here in Peachtree Corners as well as the Southeast. But this whole metro area they've come into over the past few months, working with companies and their fiber optics to be able to get companies online fast, provide bandwidth, provide great customer service, a lot different than the cable guy, let's call it. They're really involved in the community, and you'll see them more involved in the community as they grow in this area. So find out a little bit more about them and their, I think it's 90-day internet free if you sign up with them. You can do that at hargravefiber.com. So now let's cut to the chase and let's talk to our guest tonight, Curt Thompson, who's a Democrat running for Gwinnett County Commission Chair. Hey, Curt, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this and what you expect from doing this.
Sure. Well, I'm a lifelong Gwinnett resident. I was born in Decatur, but that's just where the hospital was. I started at Camp Creek Elementary and I graduated from Shiloh High School. So I grew up sort of in South Gwinnett. For 16 years, I was in the state legislature representing parts of Gwinnett County. 2 of those I was in the state house member. 14 of those I was a state senator. And then starting last February, I announced I was running for Gwinnett County Commission Chair. And of course, I've been running hard ever since. I am a lawyer by education and trade. Went to Georgia State University Law School, College of Law, and have 2 law offices. One's in Norcross in the historic district, and one is in Duluth in an office building near Gwinnett Mall.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've been involved in a lot of different things, actually, being in the legislature session for 16 years, I think it was.
That was, yep, 16 years.
House rep. You've helped pass legislation to deal with CIDs, which, if you want to explain that, you were actually ahead of one in West Gwinnett, I think, right?
Yep. What's now called Gateway 85. It was called Gwinnett Village when we founded it. And I helped get the statute passed that actually allowed for CIDs to even happen in Gwinnett County. And
CIDs are what?
Community improvement districts are it's a commercial property organization where commercial properties band together. And it's, I guess, either a quasi-governmental organization, if you're trying to be real lawyerly sounding about it, right. Where they have the power to tax and the power to offer essentially some municipal services, like especially a lot of it goes into planning and streetscaping and right. Traffic planning is one of the primary things, as well as cleanup, but they can also spend money on security. I know that the Gwinnett Village, which I was a part of, or Gateway 85, is now had paid security cars and things like that going through the district, and you'll see that as a common thing in other community improvement districts as well.
So if most people don't understand, that's actually a self-taxing district. So they tax themselves.
Yep. They add money to the millage rate, right. And then that money gets spent in that district's area, similar to the way a township would, but it's just, or a city would, but it's just for commercial properties. So being
head of that, you actually had to handle some of the similar things that you possibly would as a county commissioner with that.
Yeah, you do. You handle municipal service issues just like you would. I mean, obviously at the county commission level, it's a much bigger issue, sure. And it's a much bigger budget.
Right.
But it's similar issues, municipal services, yes.
So let's
you have to work with the county if you're a CID, just like a city, you have to work with the counties. And right. If the CID, like the Gwinnett Village, is partly in the city of Norcross, so you also have to work with that city as well. They get a board member on the board of the community improvement district, actually.
All right. So you have to deal with different levels of government.
Yes.
To do what you need to do there.
Yep.
The reason I pointed that out first is because that is a big deal in Gwinnett County when it first came here, and because it was the first, because of what Gwinnett Place Mall and that whole area was like some years ago. This was, how long has it been now?
The CIDs have been in existence probably about, I want to say about 12 years.
Okay.
I have to go back and look, but I would say, yeah.
So it's been a while. I mean, and that whole area has changed. In fact, Gwinnett Place Mall, I think, is being sold, or there's some.
Well, it's on the market now. That's Gwinnett Place CID is a different CID from Gateway 5, or but yeah, that property is currently on the market. Yeah, and obviously that has changed, and that's probably one of the things that has to be. Forgetting CIDs, dealing with the Gwinnett Place Mall area is probably one of the top priorities that any county commission chair is going to want to address when elected. Certainly, it's one of my top priorities.
Because that's a huge, expansive land right there. That's not going to remain that way, right?
I would hope not. I would hope that being a dead mall is not something that you really want in the gateway to West Gwinnett, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's been talked about as a multi-use development, maybe something similar to the, maybe not quite similar, but like the Infinity, the way that area in Duluth is being developed.
Sure.
With the convention center, hotels, retail, and all that.
Yeah, there's been different talk. I mean, over the years, you've heard everything from a cricket stadium to a mixed-use development to building a shopping center area similar to Avalon, which is over in the Alpharetta area.
Right.
I think that the main thing you need is actual leadership in the area to make sure that something actually happens. Otherwise, we'll be talking about it for the next. We've talked about it for 6 years. 10 years. We could be talking about it another 6 to 10 years if we're just talking.
For sure. And part of that too, I would think, is the idea, and we're going to jump a little bit around here a little bit, but the idea of transportation also coming, because that was going to be the first footprint of MARTA, or if not MARTA,
some regional transit, whether that's the HL or something,
or maybe MARTA managed, but whatever it is, but it'd be the first entry to Gwinnett County of mass transit of that nature, which in the vicinity of that would likely make sense, I guess. But that failed twice, I think, already.
Well, it failed once in 92. I guess I think there was some initial failing vote back in the early 70s, like when MARTA was created.
Right.
Then in 92, it went down hard in a vote. I remember because that was one of the first elections I voted in. And then, and of course, recently just failed in a special election ballot. I think that, one of the lessons from that is to not put something like that on a special election ballot.
Yeah, it was the only item on the ballot, which really, to me, made no sense. I mean, it spent money for no reason, and it actually could have
hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's one of those things, if you plan to fail, you'll fail.
Yes, and not for anything. It probably could have passed, maybe if it went to a general election. But
I think if you had high turnout, it would have passed, just because of the nature of Gwinnett County voters. If you had a full turnout election, not a special election, I sincerely believe it would pass. Now, hopefully, it's a blessing in disguise. It's hard to think of it that way as someone who supports mass transit, but hopefully we will get a better transit plan and get a better transit plan passed, soon.
And it may. I mean, I come from New York, and was on the subways and stuff.
Sure.
I can see the use of mass transit makes a lot of sense. Although in a suburb area, people don't look at it that way. They look at it as just more traffic, more money. It's $1 billion being spent just to put one station somewhere. And I can understand that versus, let's say, light rail or other forms of transportation that's less expensive.
But all of that, even when you say light rail, I think that, yes, the heavy rail is expensive. And I think that we need to seriously look at whether or not, you were mentioning you're from New York. So if you look at the Long Island Rail,
right,
going out way out in the suburbs, because if you go all the way out to Smithtown on the other end of the island, which the Long Island Rail does, that's a pretty sizable distance. Or if you even look at the Boston area rapid transit or Washington, D.C.'s transit, it goes way out into the suburbs.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you have the heavy rail always going way out into the suburbs. That's not how every system is designed. I do think that light rails and bus rapid transit are probably more cost effective. Although, when you're committing to doing that instead of heavy rail, you're also committing to having transfer stations every time you connect to the MARTA system. It would have to be, because you'd be changing rail lines.
Well, and then, right. So transit hubs. And And maybe if I mean, that's almost scary to see because if it's just a transit hub and not development around it as part of that scheme, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it can be built. I think you just have to be very intentional about it. And every large metropolitan transit system has transfer stations. It just means that if you're going to emphasize bus rapid transit or light rail, when you connect to the heavy rail system, those will always be a transfer station.
So do you foresee yourself then as a proponent of this, as a county commission chair, to be able to be an advocate for mass transit in Gwinnett County?
So I've been an advocate when I was a state senator. I was an advocate when I was a state rep. Before that, I have been an advocate on the campaign trail. It would be my hope. It's not my decision. It would be my hope that, as I say, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, that this county commission would decide to put it on the November ballot so that when I'm running for office in November, assuming, if I win the primary running in November, that it's on the ballot and passes. And then it's my job to do the best job possible of implementing that plan and updating it as things change. I think that these plans are living, breathing documents. And I think that you will have to update them over the 10, 15, 20 years of their lifespan or whatever the lifespan of the agreement is, as you actually find the actual reality of the 500,000 people that are going to move here in the next 10 years, according to the ARC, come in, where do they actually move and what are the actual traffic needs? So you'll see some updating, but it would be my hope that I would be implementing something. If not, job one is to get something ready for a ballot initiative.
Okay.
I guess that would be 2022 if you're trying to put it on a general election ballot.
Right.
But getting something on the ballot would be the earliest you could do it. I've heard arguments for and against that particular date, but that would be the earliest if you don't do it this November. Yeah.
So being able to do that now, whether it gets on the ballot or not at this point is questionable, right? I mean, our primary has moved from April to May to June. Hopefully it will happen in June. I mean, at some point they have to hold it, right?
At some point they have to decide. I think that legally, I think the chairman, the current Chairman Nash, had wanted the decision made in April. That's what I recall.
Okay.
I think that legally the lawyers have said you could wait as late as July or August and still get it on the November ballot in terms of meeting all the legal notice requirements.
Okay.
I don't think, I guess, one of the lessons from the last referendum is that they had a very short ramp window to run a campaign. And so I can understand why you wouldn't want to do that at the last minute. But legal, what is it? What's legal and what's advisable are not necessarily the same thing. April might be better, especially if you're trying to launch a significant campaign. Of course, doing something in the middle of a pandemic is doing anything in the middle of a pandemic, it always presents a challenge, I would think. There wouldn't be a lot of a campaign ramped up in April, I think, even if they voted on it at the next meeting.
Yeah, so maybe a problem, actually. So let's segue right into that, because running a campaign is really difficult to begin with. When you have how many candidates actually in the field?
I guess there's 8 total. There are 5 Democrats, and apologies if I miscounted someone, but 5, and then there are 3 Republicans.
Okay.
A total of 8.
Do you guys have a primary?
We do. Yeah, it's a partisan race. So there'll be the June 9th primary, will be the Republican. It's the general primary. It's also the presidential primary on the Democratic side.
So whoever wins June 9th is the commissioner or the chair?
No, whoever wins June 9th goes on, whichever Republican wins June 9th, and whichever Democrat wins June 9th go on the November ballot, because it's a partisan race. It's not like a judgeship that's decided. Okay. Now, that said, we do have, Georgia has the 50% plus 1 rule. So if no Democrat gets 50% plus 1, it goes into I want to say it's a July runoff, goes to a July runoff. And the same on the Republican side. They've got 3 candidates they could.
Right. Well, that's easier for 3, maybe 5 is a little bit more difficult to get that plurality, right? How has it been running a campaign? I mean, what are you doing, Curt? How are you?
I mean, you still go to events. I think there was about a week or 2 where honestly nothing was happening, and I think most people were in. So everyone was trying to adjust. Now, instead of going to the Gwinnett NAACP meeting, you go to the Gwinnett NAACP Zoom meeting. It's a lot of Zoom meetings.
Okay.
And so it's not nearly as impressive to be checking in from your kitchen, taking a picture of a computer screen where there's a screen, a grid of 9 people on it or however many people are there.
Right.
That's not nearly as impressive as checking in at an actual event with an actual selfie with actual people.
Right.
But it's a lot of Zoom meetings.
Okay.
You can't really canvass, so things shift to phone banking. And you worry about the mail because, the Postal Service has been affected by the pandemic as well. And so you worry about campaign mail and whether you have to adjust your schedule for campaign mail and things like that. And,
Right.
But other than that, it's the same. I will say that you also, campaigns are not free. They cost money to run. I tell folks that any campaigns are not run on love and affection, and so being in the middle of a pandemic with the economy shut down is not a great time to be what we call dialing for dollars. When you're especially because Democrats have stereotypically, if you look at, say, whether that's Bernie Sanders up to Joe Biden up to anybody, Democrats are much more dependent on those small dollar donations from individuals because we don't get as many of the big PAC contributions, and those are definitely, it becomes harder to justify that. You can't go out and ask folks that don't have a job to give a campaign contribution if they can't pay rent.
Now in the primaries, probably it's not as much of a problem, but if you win your primary and come the November election with Biden likely the one that's going to be on the ballot.
He's the presumptive nominee on the Democratic side, and Trump is obviously going to be Trump, Biden, and
right, unless something further happens. I mean, right now,
unless something bizarre happens. And knock on wood, I don't want to jinx it because we've had a lot of bizarre happen this year.
Yes, we have. We have absolute power, and we have all sorts of things going on.
We have people that think they have absolute power when they want credit for something, and then suddenly it's everybody else's responsibility when they
right. So you have a bit of that going on. Then we have 6 million absentee ballot applications going out for this election. Right. So lots of things going on, and I know, I forget the percentage. It was a really small percentage of voters that voted absentee. I'd imagine this time around it may be way more.
A lot higher, I would assume. If they've mailed out applications to everybody, some percentage, it'll be a much higher than it was. Now, they also moved the primary, which
correct,
to my knowledge, have never moved a primary in the middle of an election. We moved it the presidential primary has been moved twice now.
Right.
Now the presidential primary is not even competitive because Bernie Sanders has conceded and endorsed Biden, so that may be a wash on that side, but we've moved the general primary that all of us run in for the local races and the state legislative and congressional races. But I still think that even with that being moved, there'll be a lot more vote by mail just because of what's going on.
But do you think that's a detriment to Democrats?
In a primary, well,
in the primary it doesn't matter.
In the primary it doesn't matter because I suppose if we had, you saw what happened in Wisconsin where it was really about whether or not a conservative right-wing judge on the Supreme Court there would get reelected or not. And he did lose. For those that don't know, he did lose in spite of the Republicans going to court to force the election in the middle of the pandemic. But since our election, the general will not vote by mail may increase the turnout in the primary on the Republican and the Democratic side, I would assume, it may, we won't know. We've never done it this way, so you don't know till you get there, but that's a working assumption. But we don't know what we're going to have in November. If you have a double dip of this pandemic, which, the scientists are talking about the fact that it could, if it is seasonal, remember the Spanish flu lasted 3 years. It wasn't the 1918 flu that was just in 1918. It was still around for 1920. So
there were no vaccines
having a
until
vote
the
by mail
30s,
election in November, or a significant absentee vote in November, we'll see. We don't know yet, but and I'm not sure in a state as narrowly divided as Georgia who that favors. The betting money is that, certainly the Republicans think it favors the Democrats by the way they talk about it. I'm not as certain of that. But I also don't know if we're going to have that happen in the general. We're dealing with it in a primary.
Right. So let's talk about as if everything's going to be fine and normal, and we're going to be just gung ho about this, and we're going to, everyone's going to be doing the right thing down the line, and elections come in November, and we do the elections. But so let's talk about some of the other issues. So we talked about transportation a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit. We touched on development with the CID. Is there anything particularly you want to add to either one of those?
Well, I mean, I think that, job one is working on a transit plan and either implementing it and getting it passed. I also think that we need to seriously look at our county planning infrastructure in general. I think if you're going to have 500,000 people move here over the next 10 years, you had better plan well for that. I think that, especially in places like West Gwinnett and South Gwinnett, you're going to have to look at trying to incentivize a lot of mixed use developments that are more vertical, where you've got the residential above and the retail at street level. It doesn't have to be high rises like Midtown Atlanta, but at least something that looks more like downtown Decatur or even Vining's area.
Talk about like 7 stories, 6 stories, 8 stories, something like that.
Something like that.
You also mentioned about affordable housing.
Sure.
There's different philosophies on that. How do you incentivize that so then the developer will provide reasonable rental for people that, they're not on a living wage, but they have to live in the area maybe.
Right. Well, to have, whether it's affordable housing or workforce housing or senior housing, I think you do have to incentivize it at some level, depending on what you're talking about. Some of that may be speeding up the permitting process. Some of that may be allowing people those height variances. It's a lot harder to get a height variance in Gwinnett County than it is in Cobb or DeKalb or Fulton in terms of to go vertical, because the only way you're going to the cost of land is only going to go up. I mean, you may have the pandemic recession or whatever they're going to call this is probably going to flatten out some real estate costs, but in general, real estate's going. The days of having, if you're looking for affordable housing, being everybody on a half acre or a 3/4 acre lot, that's not going to happen. You're talking about bringing condos in and more townhomes in and things in the mixed use development. Especially you would want that in the area where they're going to build the Amazon plant in South Gwinnett, because otherwise those folks are just going to work in the Amazon plant and live in DeKalb County where the housing is cheaper.
Right.
And then they get all of the benefits of people living there and shopping there, and DeKalb gets all the benefits, and we'll just get the traffic in and out.
So how do you force developers to do that? How do you?
I think you can force it. I think you have to incentivize it. You have to offer either speeding up the permitting process, speeding up rezoning process where it's necessary, and you probably have to you may have to go to higher density, which means smaller square footage, similar to what you have in the city of Atlanta or city of Decatur for some of these townhome and condominium communities.
Okay. All right.
To allow for higher density, because once they can have higher density, once they can actually build something with higher density, then they can, lower the price without necessarily lowering the quality. Because I don't necessarily want us to, affordable housing needs to be quality affordable housing and not substandard affordable housing.
Right, because otherwise, I mean, I remember when I was on the planning commission some years back, I mean, you get developers coming in and they would build higher density properties, 13 units an acre, maybe, we're talking about townhomes, and then people would just buy it up, like 6, 12, 10 of them, and then rent them.
And then they keep them up, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're wanting owner occupied stuff or long-term renters, not folks that move every 6 months chasing a $15 rent discount kind of thing.
Right. Yes, and that's 7-year plateau.
That you really have to look at that.
Yeah. All right. So,
but it's really hard to mandate it. I mean, I'm not there. There are places that have mandates like that. I don't know if that would really work in Georgia's construction environment. I think you have to look at what other folks have done, whether that's in the city of Atlanta or in DeKalb County or Cobb County.
Okay. All right. Listen, it makes sense. And the problem with these things is always whether you actually mandate it or if you incentivize it, can they get around it? There's always little give and take there. No?
And you can use things like other areas like Chicago's use tax increment financing and tax allocation districts. So you can give tax incentives also so that it makes it more affordable for folks to move in, because then they have 5 years. Oftentimes it's done as the property taxes phase in over 5 years so that people have time to essentially grow their income into the property they're living.
Mhm. All right. So there are ways to do it, and we just need the courage to be able to do that, right?
Yeah. You need courage and leadership and focus. You've got to actually be willing to say this is a priority, make it a priority. Tell your planning commissioners it's a priority. Tell your planning department it's a priority.
Do you think the county makeup right now, as far as who's commissioners right now, will have the same mindset as you if you became county chair? That you'd have to work with?
You've got 3 seats up for, there are going to be 3 new commissioners. And every time I think you have an election, it's like every time you have an appointment to the Supreme Court, it changes the makeup of the court entirely because it changes how the interpersonal reactions are. So I think that broadly, yes, I would expect there to be more of a focus on quality, affordable housing, and more of a focus on mass transit. You won't have Tommy Hunter's leaving. You know, I guess, you know, this is the you know, he's the NIMBY's NIMBY kind of guy.
Yes, yes.
I mean, there are things I could say, but they're not sort of, you know, they're definitely PG-13 at the very least, you know. But but you know, that type of commissioner is going to be gone. You know, that's not an offense to him necessarily. It's just saying that no one running for, you know, the current set of seats is of that mindset that I'm aware of.
More moderate.
Yeah.
Okay. As far as justice, criminal justice reform, 287G is a big deal with what's going on now. I know several of the sheriff candidates have said that day one they'll just disregard that because it's a voluntary thing anyway. What's your feelings on 287?
Well, I think it needs to be abandoned. I think it costs the county money, and you'll have people say, "Oh, well, the county gets a grant for it." Well, the county's going to get that grant regardless of whether from the federal government, whether they do 287G or not. It's costing us money that we're not getting reimbursed for because that's an additional expense that same federal grant could be used for something else. And so, you know, it's my hope that whoever's the next sheriff ends that program because it's ultimately the sheriff's call. If the sheriff doesn't want to do that, I think the county commission needs to look at cutting the sheriff's you know, we have the ultimate power of the purse strings on the county commission side, and they need to take a serious look at either cutting the sheriff's department budget or restricting county funds to not be used from that, make him go get it from drug forfeiture money or actually get it from the feds and not get it from the county budget.
And for some people that don't know, 287G is the regulation to work with ICE detention program, right?
Yes.
That the sheriff actually, his team acts as if they're ICE agents almost.
Right.
Okay. So as far as economics supporting families, we're going to go through the list real quick. A little bit about middle class, lower middle class, working class. Are there certain policies that come to the forefront for you?
Well, I think that you know, we touched on affordable housing, and that's one. You know, I have proposed that the county look at operating or contracting in some sort of public-private partnership to offer countywide Wi-Fi in some form, so that folks don't have to take their kids to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's to do their homework, because nowadays, you know, that's a real problem, is that, you know, not everyone, especially at the lower income strata, can afford. My Comcast bill is $180 a month, and I do not have the premium channels. You know, that's internet, TV, and now granted, I have the higher speed internet, but if they're trying to study, but I don't have any premium channels, and that's what it's costing me. And so that's you know, I can afford that, but that's serious money for a lot of families. And I think that the county might be able to get a better price for folks, and definitely should look at offering that. And I think that we also need to look at our library system. There's a program in the library system that allows folks to get a high school diploma who aren't necessarily traditional students, but it's an actual high school diploma, not a GED. And I think that we need to look at expanding programs like that where possible. Would
that be expanded through the Gwinnett school system, county?
No, that's through the public library system, which is part of the Gwinnett. The school system is part of the school board.
Right.
You know, I definitely would love for the school board and the county commission to coordinate better together. They almost act like they're on different planets. They don't talk to each other, it seems. At least that's how it appears. And I wish that there was more cooperation between the two. But ultimately, the K through 12 stuff is on them.
Wow.
This is just a program that's offered through the library system, which the Gwinnett County Public Library is about 80% funded by the county.
You were talking about Wi-Fi before. What about 4G networking? There's a lot of talk about 4G being used. I mean, if you're talking down the line, future
4G,
works,
5G that they're
5G. I'm sorry, 5G. The next one will be 6G, but 5G, yes. That's what we have in Gwinnett County, in Peachtree Corners on the Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 1.5 mile track that's supposed to work with IoT and with self-driving cars and all that.
Sure. My Rotary Club meets over there at the Peachtree Corners City Hall, so I
So you're familiar
with
with
track every day, or at least once a week.
So does any 5G is one thing that's sort of, let's call it sexy and stuff. It's great to have 5G because you need that for self-driving cars, IoT. But what smart city, because even counties plan these things out, right? Whether it's water, whether it's energy, whether it's having charging stations for cars, whether it's using solar, anything, any ideas that you'd like to see planned out over the next decade, let's say, that would work in that realm?
In the technology realm specifically?
Technology, energy, would think
I think that, I don't know if this is where you were going. I mean, I do think that, the countywide Wi-Fi that I was talking about would be part of that.
Definitely.
I think if we want to ever, we occasionally talk about creating a high-tech corridor along 316.
Mm-hmm.
It might be nice to actually do more than talk about it and put it as a paragraph and a blurb about things we'd like to do, but we never actually get around to doing.
Right.
At least around the Gwinnett, Georgia College area, we ought to really look at actually trying to implement that.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if this is, what you meant from long range planning, but eventually we're going to have to address the issue of water.
Right.
And possibly upgrading the Yellow River plant. I mean, the Wayne Hill water treatment plant is sort of worldwide state of the art. There's not a lot higher you can go with that. But you've got the two other, the substation down close to where Gwinnett, Fulton, and DeKalb come together. Mm. And then you've got the Yellow River treatment plant that you may want to look at upgrading depending on what the technology available is. Mm-hmm. Now those are expensive projects that are done through the water department. But it took, the reason the thing's called the Wayne Hill water treatment plant is because Wayne Hill took leadership in that area. And I think that someone may have to take, in the next 10 to 15 years, and it's always cheaper if you can do it sooner than if you do it later. We're going to have to address the issue of water. And simply asking the courts to let us take more out of the Chattahoochee River is not really a solution, because there's only so much water in the Chattahoochee. And eventually that, like getting credit for putting water back in the Chattahoochee doesn't put more water actually in the universe. It just gives us more credit for what we've done, but it doesn't put more water in the universe, or more potable water in the universe.
Right. But even so, let's take it a step away for a second. Let's go back quickly to development for a second. Mm-hmm. You were talking about maybe doing 6-7 story mid-rises to be able to the development that's going to be coming up 85. Should they be LED buildings? Should they be, should we move towards a more
we're going to have to move towards a more energy efficient type of construction, definitely. And some of that's going to be market driven. Some of that's going to have to be driven by the government. But it has to happen. I mean, whether you're looking at it from a global climate change perspective and doing our part to not contribute more to that, mm-hmm. to just how do we get the most bang for our buck when it comes to things like water and electricity and land use.
Okay. Public safety. There's a lot of security.
More of what the county, that's the most important thing the county really does, but yes.
So do you think that needs to be strengthened a little bit? Where are we with that?
The way I've usually talked about that is that, we have one of the largest police forces but we don't have one of the best response times. And I think that at some point we need to take a look at that and figure out what's going on. If you just look at it and compare our police force to the only comparable one of its size, which is the city of Atlanta, we have a very top-heavy police force. We have far fewer people on patrol and a lot more people in headquarters than, say, the city of Atlanta does, which is the only comparably sized thing. And the only way you're going to increase response times on calls is if you have more street-level cops. You know, and so I think that we need to look at not just necessarily increasing the size of the force. We have one of the largest forces in the state, but how is that force allocated?
Okay. What about technology? Right now, I know, for example, the city of Peachtree Corners is putting out through Georgia Power 15 cameras to plate recognition cameras. Actually, to some degree, facial recognition cameras as well within some of the city town center that recognizes faces. At least be able to count the size of the crowd, if you will. Do you see more technology needs to be rolled out into Gwinnett Police?
You know, that runs into a civil liberties issue, to be honest. And so you're always a little bit cautious about that. You know, we had the issue of first there were traffic light cameras and then suddenly there weren't because you couldn't cross-examine a traffic light camera if you wanted to protest your ticket, kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that it requires a lot of balancing. I mean, I think that, you know, it's wrong for us to say, oh, well, you can't do any of that, you know, in a culture where we always click agree to the terms and conditions without ever reading them, whether it's for Facebook or Amazon or anything else. We apparently have no problem sharing our data with corporate America. I think that inevitably some of that's going to come, but I don't know how much of that's a priority in terms of you know, and I would have to look at talk with our police chief really and see what is really the best use of our dollars. I would rather have more street level cops than more cameras taking photographs of people, because the idea is to deter crime. All the camera does is catch the criminal, which is, you know, that's great, but I would like to deter the crime so that it doesn't happen. And I think that you do more of that if you have more street level cops, if you have more patrols, if you even have, depending on the density of the area, you know, foot patrols even.
Okay. Probably last question, then I'm going to ask you to, you know, let me know if we've missed anything, but just because it's on your website and it's the last thing on there, and I'm wondering how a county commission may be able to help this, and that's decriminalizing marijuana.
Right. So, you know, our solicitor's already decided he's not going to prosecute it because he says the current hemp statute makes it hard to tell what's hemp versus marijuana. I think that the city of Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, Clark County, I think city of Clarkston, DeKalb County, several places have decriminalized it to the sense that if you're caught for simple possession, which is, you know, possession of less than an ounce,
right? Yeah.
That they will issue you a ticket. You don't go to jail, because to be quite honest, it's very disparate how this law is enforced. And you know, the majority of folks that get arrested and sent to jail in Gwinnett County on marijuana possession are the vast majority are people of color. You can't tell me that the vast majority of people smoking marijuana are people of color. It's just being selectively, like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's not.
There's nothing about marijuana that says a particular race is more likely to use it than other. That's not how that works.
I'm sure if you go to Johns Creek or other places, it's used a lot. So
yeah. So I think that if you gave, because, you know, what currently happens could change the moment either the state legislature changes the hemp statute, or if you ever get a different solicitor that has a different view. And I think that one thing that you should do is just, you know, put that out there, have that be an ordinance so that it can be, have that be an ordinance so that they can write a ticket. You still have to pay a fine, but you're not going to go to jail. You're not going to have to try and figure out how to make $1,000 bond.
Right.
And it's not going to disproportionately impact minorities.
So I think the ticket in the city of Atlanta is only $75 or something. It's a minimal amount.
Yeah, I would say something like that. But a lot of cities have gone to that, even in Georgia. And I think that that's what Gwinnett County should do too, because it will also save money at the jail, you know, because to be quite honest, no one who says when they're a kid, they said they want to be a cop is because they want to go arrest people for smoking weed at fraternity parties. That's not why people want to go. That's not why anyone wanted to become a cop. Yeah. And then they could focus on human trafficking. They could focus on domestic violence. They could focus on the actual crimes against people, crimes against persons, crimes against property. And so that we actually have violent people in the jails and not folks taking up space in the jail who are there on small level marijuana offenses.
Right, for sure, especially our jails, which I think is somewhat overcrowded as is. So
yeah.
All right, so we've come
jail money.
Right.
And allow the police to focus on more serious crime.
Yeah, the violent crimes. That makes more sense to me. We've come to the end of our time together. So let me ask you, was there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to share first?
Well, just, I got into this race basically saying, I'm here to ask for your vote. Mm-hmm. And if you honor me with your vote on election day, I promise you that the one thing I can promise you is that I will fight for you every day in Lawrenceville, just as I fought for you every day in Atlanta in the General Assembly. And for those that want to, find out more about the campaign or volunteer for the campaign, they can go to CurtForGwinnett.com. That's CURTFOR spelled out Gwinnett.com.
Great. Thank you, Curt. I appreciate you coming on the show with me. Everyone, if you need that information, just remember also you should have gotten the mail-in ballot application probably a week and a half ago.
And they should be mailing it out starting the 20th to 24th of April. They should be turning those.
I know we got it last week, and it's really easy. There's 3 things you have to do on it. Just check the information, sign it, and either mail it back or you literally can take a picture of it and email it from your phone. So it's and then you get the ballot. Then you got to fill out the ballot. So don't forget that part of it.
You have to pick whether you want a Democrat, a Republican, or a nonpartisan ballot.
That's right. That too. All right. Cool. So appreciate you coming on, Curt. Thank you for sharing the issues of where you believe and what you want people to know about you. And everyone, just remember June 9th is the election day. So pay attention to what's going on out there. COVID
if you're mailing in your ballot, it has to be received by June 9th. Don't be mailing a ballot on June 9th. It won't
it has to be postmarked or received on
received June 9th. So that means I wouldn't be mailing. Please don't mail the ballot after June 1st because we don't know how slow the mail's sometimes quick, mail's sometimes not. I would be mailing it earlier, not later.
It's good that you said that because most people might think it has to be postmarked that day.
In some states it is. So if you've moved here from somewhere else, postmark governs in places like Arizona and California. It doesn't govern here.
Okay. So make sure you mail it a week ahead at least.
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you, Curt. Appreciate you. Hang in there with me for a minute and then we'll just sign off right now. So everyone, if you're getting this on the feed later, just leave a comment in the box if you'd like. If you're getting this on podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, leave a review. Livingin Peachtreecorners.com is where you can find more information. Thank you.